Hello and welcome to my new video. Today we're not talking about joying radio. Instead, I have here a little one. What do you mean by little? A Pioneer. What Pioneer is it? It says it's a SPH-DA360DAB model device. It means it's an entry-level media receiver from Pioneer without a CD drive, double DIN, with a 6.8-inch screen. And yes, I would say let's unbox it first and then see what's inside. There it is, everything unpacked. And yes, what does the entire package content consist of? What do we have here? We have, of course, the radio, double DIN Pioneer with a 6.8-inch screen. It's relatively shallow in terms of installation depth, which means it should fit well. And on the back we have the main connections and additional ports. Means we have antenna connection, we have here a DAB connection, GPS connection, microphone, a few things that we'll look at the plugs for in a moment. And here on the side we have the main power connection and the USB connection. What all goes in there? What other cables do we have included? Let's keep looking. Quite interesting. The GPS antenna. That means there's a GPS antenna included. The reason you need it we'll actually see shortly and later in the video. Then we have the microphone. This is basically the hands-free microphone for CarPlay, for Bluetooth audio, whatever. Yes, just the very small O cable is included, which means it's not the standard headphone O cable, so not 3.5, but 2 something. And yes, here's the microphone. Then we have a USB extension. This is a USB extension cable, because we've already seen the socket at the back of the radio, and that's the cable to run it to the front. Wiring harness. This is where the ISO connector goes in. And this here is the connector that goes into the radio. Otherwise, there are a few wires that lead outside. Or rather, what does a few mean? Here we have the handbrake signal. The handbrake signal has to be connected to the handbrake. Or you connect it directly to ground. Of course, I can't recommend that. You don't do it like that. Otherwise, is there nothing special here? What else do we have? We have an AUX cable. This is one of those white connectors that go into the back of the radio for AUX in. If we want to connect an AUX fan, we have a few more screws. We have another cable. For the steering wheel remote control, or rather for the reverse camera. There it is. Unfortunately, we won't be installing a reverse camera. And the RCA out and video out cable, that's what it's called. The radio has 2-channel front out, 2-channel subwoofer out, and an additional video output for the rear screen. The release plates that you have, a little more glue, and of course the user manual, all included. So what can the radio do? What is the radio? Why do I have the radio here? That's relatively simple. I didn't buy a new radio again, but I have a good friend who wanted a new car radio. The installation video will follow. Basically, the parameters for acquiring the radio were quite simple. It should be a double DIN radio. It should be a radio with a screen. It should be a radio with wireless Android Auto or Wireless CarPlay. It should cost as little as possible. And it should have DAB+. Those were the requirements for the radio. And yes, I would say the Pioneer SPH-DA360DAB comes with, I believe, a suggested retail price of €450. That actually, there's hardly anything comparable with wireless functionality and a large display. So the radio was acquired I just unpacked the radio, and next I'm going to connect the radio to my tester. And then let's take a look at the menu navigation.
Once it has arrived, I'm turning on the radio on the tester first. The radio starts up relatively quickly. It starts up by default. Into a warning screen, I say. But you don't have to press OK. The screen disappears on its own. And then the music that was last playing is already running. We have different buttons that we can press. That's the menu button. We can only scroll down here. We can see that the image is not completely smooth. It's a bit choppy. But I think you can live with that. I haven't connected a radio at the moment, but the radio functionalities are standard radio functionalities. That means we have 3 different FM bands, 2 AM bands, USB, songs on stick, view pictures, videos. USB, I have a few songs on my USB stick. Theoretically, we could also watch pictures and videos. And switching between folders isn't a problem at all. And that's working quite well. There are touch buttons on the side for louder and quieter, but we can actually touch the screen to make it louder and quieter. The number of volume levels is sufficient to set it up properly. To set it up, I haven't connected the phone at this point yet at all. That's why we don't have any blur. Bluetooth settings moment. I'm just looking for my phone so we can try out the Bluetooth connection and also the wireless CarPlay. Relatively easy. Connect via Bluetooth. Tell both devices that it's a match. The phone recognized it and immediately said, okay, do we want to do CarPlay? Yes, let's do CarPlay. And all the settings like connecting to the Wi-Fi and so on happen automatically. And when that works, the CarPlay icon will light up. We'll see that in a moment. There we already have the cable symbol. And now we see that we need to connect the GPS antenna. Yes, because to use the map, that information was actually new to me until then, that the radio for wireless CarPlay. When it comes to the GPS antenna, the whole joying radio needs it. I haven't connected a GPS antenna, and that's why wireless CarPlay doesn't work properly here. That's why we're going to connect the GPS antenna for a moment. So, once the GPS antenna is connected, the wireless CarPlay should work without any issues. First, let's check the connection settings to see how the GPS reception is in the garage. And the GPS reception in the garage is okay, definitely. Not perfect, but definitely okay, especially for a garage with a concrete ceiling. And we're already in CarPlay. At this point, now we have the podcast player, but as you can see, we see the regular CarPlay interface over wireless. On the battery icon on the left side, we can see the battery indicator from the phone. Otherwise, the maps are working just fine. That means the GPS is working quite well so far. And now we can use wireless CarPlay on a Pioneer SPH-DA360DAB playing, which is actually a good piece for the price. Otherwise, let's take another look at the settings. We can check out the system settings. To see in the connection settings, the GPS status, which is actually quite okay in the garage, we can turn on the beep. DAB settings, radio settings, system information. Let's see which versions we have installed. I haven't done an update for this radio yet. The Bluetooth setting is clear. We can adjust the brightness. Funny, at this point we can only adjust the settings. What we currently have means at the moment it is the light is off, now the light is on. And now I can adjust the brightness of the change at night. We can see the radio changes with car lights. Controls can adjust color. Turn the car's lights on and off. And we can also adjust the controls in terms of color and brightness, the way we want it, in which color. And we can choose a screen background. Screen backgrounds are a few pre-selected. There's nothing great about this, but on the second page, do we have the option to choose our own images? Unfortunately, I don't have any images on the USB stick right now. But then you can definitely choose your own background image, which could possibly match the background image from Android Auto. Then it looks quite smooth together. In the EQ we have a fader for left and right. Nothing crazy in the front and back. But can we also just use touch? It's quite nice operationally. It's just a bit tricky to find the center, but you can use the arrow keys for that. Subwoofer. Configure high pass for front and back. We've got RCA outputs in there, so for the front and back we can configure a high pass. No, we can configure a low pass. And for the subwoofer we can configure a low pass, of course only if it's activated. The high pass filters range from 25 to 250 Hz, and the low pass filters are the same. This is the 13-band EQ that we have. We have a few predefined bands. And with the volume settings, it's actually about being able to set volume signals for each source. And we also have the overall volume setting for each speaker. We can set a volume, and we have a bass boost that you probably shouldn't need if it's a proper system. The Wi-Fi settings are actually never of interest. The device itself turns the Wi-Fi on and off with the Bluetooth settings, so it doesn't really matter. You can of course change the device names for Bluetooth. We have camera settings. If a camera were connected, we can specify how they should be controlled. Actually quite practical, and we can also configure the color a bit. Phone connection settings. Here we can specify whether the incoming car should be used as a mass storage device. That's the sign up there. Otherwise, we can also specify whether the driver's position is on the left or right, to then display the screens and everything, and the control, I think, to display CarPlay correctly. The USB player is easy to use. We can scroll, we can select the songs. That works so far. And of course, we also have music from our USB when we're in CarPlay and Android Auto. That's not a problem. So the radio, the camera view would of course work if we had a camera connected. Now we don't have one at this point. That means we can access our camera at any time, which is certainly very practical. DAB at this point, I also haven't connected the DAB antenna here, and even then it wouldn't have any amplification, because they are not connected to ground, etc. Would clamp. But I can tell you that the DAB reception is quite useful when it's built in. When you turn off the radio, it doesn't take long for the radio to completely shut down. That means we see the display off. We are currently at Saturns Moma. Now we are at
and now we're at 0, which means the radio is completely off. Doesn't need any power? In standby. That means the battery won't be drained, just the way it should be. So once again, what have we summarized as the key features of this radio? We have a 6.8-inch screen, we have wireless, CarPlay, we have wireless, Android Auto, we have a USB port. We have a camera input. We have DAB+, which works. Pretty useful, provided you have an antenna. Of course, this radio also has Bluetooth. And we can also do Bluetooth audio streaming, and the radio has a 13-band equalizer. You can customize the color of the buttons. You can simply choose a wallpaper or use your own. Overall, it's actually a usable radio. It can play MP3, WMA, AAC, WAV, and FLAC files. There are video files in H.264, MKVS, FLVS, MPEG-4s, MPEG-2s, and TS. They work. When it comes to images, if you want to have a wallpaper, it should be a JPG or a BMP image. For the sound enthusiasts among us, the radio does have a 13-band equalizer, but that's about it. That means we don't have any great DSP functionalities in here. We have 6 preamp outputs, each with 2 volts. 2 for the front, 2 for the back, and 2 for the subwoofer. We can activate the subwoofer separately, but it doesn't output a full signal. Otherwise, I measured the frequency response. I'm going to show that now. It actually looks pretty good. In the bass range, let's put it this way. From 60-70 Hz, there is a drop of approx. 2 dB. But in my opinion, that's manageable and not too bad. The frequency response looks a bit wavy, but the resolution is also set very high. So you really don't need to worry too much here. Otherwise, the SPH-DA360DAB is the latest device from Pioneer's SPH series. It's the only one with wireless CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. It can also be connected via USB and is, overall, a solid device. The restrictions on DSP and Co. I personally think that's manageable, because if you're aiming for sound quality anyway, you should go for an external DSP or a DSP amplifier. So that's really not a problem. The only thing that's a bit annoying is, are these only are 2-volt preamp outputs? The other radios from Pioneer have more power on the line. I assume that the colleague will be driving around with this radio for a bit longer, so that if we have any things that can still be tried out. Thank you all. If you have anything, just write it in the comments. Otherwise, until next time. Thomas.